Hi everyone, I'm Elle Townsend. I'm a web engineer here at Monzo, and I'm here to talk to you about putting the you as in you web engineers, in user experience. So whether you like it or not, user experience design and user experience in general plays a really critical role in shaping how users experience online websites. I want to look into today about how user experience principles can be integrated into the web development process to create websites that not only look nice, but also feel nice and provide really nice user experiences. I'm going to talk about some fundamental user experience principles and how they can then be applied in web development. I'm going to show some examples of like little bits of user experience in terms of web, and how we can harness these principles effectively in web development. So yeah, that's me. I'm Elle, I work at Monzo, and I have a website, and monzo.com, yeah, that's what I work on. So user experience principles they're not like rules, you can break them, they are just principles. They can be adapted and expanded with combinations of things like user experience research, questionnaires, all sorts of different like approaches you can take to help create the best possible experience for web users. These are 4 different principles, like groups of principles that I picked out and that I want to talk about today. And the first one is heuristics. So heuristics means enabling a person to discover or learn something for themselves. So it's all about helping people make decisions and discover things on their own. And most of these principles were kind of initially developed, I guess, in the 1990s. So a bit of a while ago. Fundamental principles kind of does what it says on the tin. They are the fundamentals, just fundamental ideas. Not really much else to say on those. Gestalt principles are actually, is a German word that means an organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts. So these are principles of visual perception, and they are all about how humans gain understanding from different stimuli and making sense of visual information. And these principles were actually kind of developed in the 1920s by German psychologists. And then finally, we have cognitive biases. So these are more about decision-making and interpreting information. So how users perceive and interpret and interact with digital interfaces, and understanding how these cognitive biases can impact the way that people do that. And I'm going to take you through each one of these, and I'm going to have one example of each one. The first one being the aesthetic usability effect. This is a heuristic principle, and it was created or founded, I guess, in 1995 by some researchers at Hitachi. They were actually looking into ATM UIs, and they were looking at how aesthetics, how nice the interface looked, impacted perception of use. So it was all about how did it look and how easy was it to use. And there was actually a strong correlation found between aesthetics and aesthetic appeal and the perceived ease of use. So it wasn't even about how easy it was to use, it was how easy it looked like it was to use. So nice looking designs are really important, and they can sway how functional your users think your website is. So here's kind of a small little example I've mocked up of something along these lines. Functionally, but they both do the same thing, but one of them has a bit of an aesthetic sprinkle on it, looks a bit nicer, and potentially could be perceived to be easier to use by users. Users tend to enjoy aesthetically pleasing designs, and who can blame them? We all like shiny, fancy things. So making nice, visually appeasing designs can actually make up for a bit of a lack of functionality. Not completely, you can't do nothing and make it look nice, but nice looking designs can go a long way. In doing that, negative space is really important. Having cluttered screens is not very easily readable for users, and it also takes users' focus away from what they're trying to do. So using white space is really important as part of this principle, and also being consistent. Maintaining uniformity in your designs helps with predictability, so your users can become familiar with how your site works and reduce their cognitive load in trying to do what they want to do on your website. So yeah, making your website look nice is really important. The Doherty threshold is a fundamental principle of user experience, and this is all about productivity, essentially. It was founded by a study done by IBM in the 1970s. All of these principles are kind of a bit old, but we still use them today, that's fine. But this one states that response times for interactive computer systems should be kept below 400 milliseconds, or 4 seconds, to maintain the user's flow of thought. So this is all about optimizing the performance and perceived responsiveness of your websites to keep your users engaged. This is an example of how you might like to do that. Instead of just showing a little thing that goes around while your page is loading, you could have a little progress bar, or it doesn't show up very well on this screen, but like a skeleton screen that has kind of grayed out area where content's supposed to go when it loads. So in order to implement this in web development, you can play with the perception of your users. So yes, optimization is important, speedy websites, all of that good stuff. But you can do a lot with the perception of responsiveness to help you out. So reducing perceived wait times, like with things like skeleton loading screens and progress bars, can help that user experience, as well as actually adding a little bit of delay. It has been found that if you put a little bit of delay into some of your things, they can actually feel a little bit more trustworthy. I don't know if you've ever paid for something online and it just goes by too quickly and you're like, wait, did I actually pay for that? Like you go in your bank and check. So yeah, adding a little bit of delay can also help you out. But it is important to remember that 400 milliseconds back in the 1970s was loading a text-based document with no CSS, no JavaScript, no nothing. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt there that your web page might not get to that crisp number. The law of similarity is a Gestalt principle which explains how humans perceive and organize visual information. So this is all about when users are looking at a group of objects, they tend to perceive things with similar characteristics to be related. So in this example, we've got a couple of buttons on this menu, and the difference here being that if the two buttons are the same color and they look exactly the same, your users might get a little bit confused and be like, well, what, does the delete button do that? And so it's all about kind of being consistent and playing with similarity to your advantage for all of that sort of good stuff. Using your buttons and styling to kind of create familiarity across your site. This also includes stuff like borrowing design patterns from other places, the things like the save icon, all of that good stuff. Using things that your users would already be familiar with. You can make use of that in your web design, and that will help users more easily become familiar with your site in the way that your site does things. Again, consistency. If your delete button always looks a certain way, make sure it always looks a certain way so that users can find it. But when you have a lot of similarity across your website, being distinct can also be a benefit. So if you want to really draw a user's attention to something, if it stands out from the similarity, your users' eyes are going to be drawn to it. And The next one is the peak end rule. So this is a cognitive bias, and this one is actually all about how people tend to judge experiences. So users, or people in general, I guess, actually tend to judge an experience, and they judge the experience overall by the most emotionally intense point, which is in this rule called the peak, and then how the event ends. So like if you go to the cinema and watch a film and then you tell someone about it afterwards, you're probably going to talk to them about the most intense part, the twist, the bit that really got you, and how the film ended. They're the two bits that are going to sway you the most, and the same goes for experiences on the web too. So, for example, because these moments in your users' time throughout your site have a disproportionate effect on how users perceive that this experience is going to go, you need to make sure as a web developer that these key touch points are nice and delightful. So we want to minimize the negative peaks. We want to reduce the impact of that highly emotional moment if it's negative, with things like getting rid of error messages that aren't very helpful, or making sure that the user knows what's going on if something's gone wrong. And then also bringing delight into the final moments of a process, like a nice, satisfying sign-up screen, for example. We really, in this principle, it's all about having a good impression, making sure that things flow smoothly, and when they don't, making sure that you're mitigating for that and still helping your user have a good experience. Again, optimizing, when things take ages to load, that's a bad experience, and that might sway how your user judges the entire process as a whole. And adding nice little delightful things like satisfying animations, personalized touches, to make your site just feel good for your users. So that's been kind of 4 different points from 4 different user experience principles. So to summarize, these principles are not just about creating pretty pages. They're about creating meaningful and enjoyable experiences for people that are using your website. We need to make sure that we put the users at the heart of web development, understand their needs, what they want from this experience that they're getting on your website, and what their pain points might be when they're doing that. And we can do that by things like embracing simplicity, helping your users find what they want to find on your site without getting lost, remembering the need for speed. Your users don't want to wait around, so having nice, speedy web page loads is always a good thing, but you can also play with the perception of that speed to various effects. As well, consistency is really important. I know I've mentioned that a few times now already, but consistency breeds familiarity and therefore trust. So keeping your design elements and interactions consistent will help your users become familiar with your site and trust what your site is trying to help them with. And finally, please try to sprinkle some delight into your web pages. Your users want to be charmed, they want to have nice, fun experiences, and whatever you can do to help that would be amazing. We can improve the web one delightful click at a time. I spoke really quickly, but thank you so much for listening. That's me.